The current Ebola crisis in West Africa has been very challenging and very difficult. It has been going on for the past 5 to 6 months now in the region, and the rest of the world picked it up in the past month or so. But for us West Africans, since February, we've been enduring stories about sudden deaths as a result of a mysterious illness or some cultural superstitious disease. There's a general sense of fear, a general sense of caution. It's been really hectic. It's been very difficult for us as West Africans.
And now to the latest in an Ebola outbreak that can't seem to be contained. Today, World Health officials said that the outbreak in West Africa is racing ahead of efforts to control it.
Je m'appelle Saba Temesadnou, je suis un patient qui a été guéri de la maladie Ebola. J'ai été victime, il faut qu'on voie ma face.
Today, we are providing the information that an individual traveling from Liberia has been diagnosed with Ebola in the United States.
Ebola virus disease, more commonly known as simply Ebola, is a rare and deadly disease caused by infection with one of the Ebola virus strains. It can cause disease in humans and non-human primates, including monkeys, gorillas, and chimpanzees. The first known Ebola outbreak in humans occurred in 1976 near the Ebola River in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. Since then, outbreaks have appeared sporadically in Africa, primarily in isolated rural areas. 2014 has seen the most devastating recurrence of this infection. Beginning in Guinea, the outbreak reached Sierra Leone in March of 2014, causing infections and resulting in a high mortality rate. While neighboring Liberia and Guinea have made strides in halting the epidemic, as of December, Sierra Leone is still struggling to contain this relentless infection. The early symptoms of Ebola can closely mimic other diseases common to West Africa, like the flu, malaria, and typhoid fever, making it difficult to accurately diagnose.
There's a lot of confusion about where Ebola comes from, not just in Liberia or Sierra Leone, but in the world at large, and even some medical experts who think that the fight is against the virus jumping from animals to humans. It's not. It's person-to-person transmission because the caregivers aren't protected. Whatever we call these places where we are isolating people following infection control, they need to have proper care, and they need food, and they need all sorts of assistance that anybody needs when they're critically ill. You need something to protect the caregivers, and they don't have it. This gear, it's hot and it's humid. How long should a nurse or doctor wear this stuff? Looks like it should be a very brief time. A shift should be 2 hours, not 8. And then the personal protective equipment needs to be destroyed. And then all this happens again. So it ends up being a very demanding effort, which is all about systems, right? Every 20 days, the epidemic is going to double again. If we do have decisive action, which it feels to me like we might be mustering right now, then we will turn the epidemic around. To protect the public's health, you have to have significant investments. There's no question in my mind that without invoking a human rights model, we're not going to keep up with the epidemic. We need to draw on this obvious empathy that you're reading about now and then put it in place and cement it in place. If there were a right to some basic services, really a right for everybody, it'd be less easy for epidemics like this to spread.
Okay, what is your favorite thing to learn in school?
He said that he likes to read in school as one of the favorite things he likes.
That's very good.
My name is Joseph Boma from Kali's Secondary School, Hastings.
My name is Asana Tujalo. I am attending the Immaculate Academy Secondary School.
My name is Mohamed Isif from the Abadi Municipal Junior Secondary School.
Hello, my name is Ria Kamara. I attend the Abadi Municipal Junior Secondary School.
My name is Albadi Banguam. I'm from the Abadi Municipal Junior Secondary School.
Hi, my name is Aminata Ture and I'm attending the Moncton Municipal Junior Secondary School.
Hi friends, my name is Alba. My name is Geneva Sidauda from Kelly Secondary School, Hastings.
My name is Shot Janiano, attending the Moncton Municipal Junior Secondary School.
Because of the outbreak of the Ebola in our country has been in a critical situation. Many of our people are now presently suffering.
As of now, we are going through a lot of difficulty because of the deadly disease.
It has been very hard for us to survive. 2 days ago, one of my friends, she was feeling her tummy, so she was talking to the pharmacist. But the pharmacist refused to attend to her because she was afraid. She thought she's a victim of Ebola. So we have to take her to the hospital and they too refused, and she eventually died without any treatment. And this Ebola is not only affecting us financially but emotionally, because some of our friends or family members, when they get affected by Ebola, even if they get well, there will still be segregation between them. Say you are an Ebola victim, so it's affecting them emotionally.
Now we are out of school because of state of emergency. Due to this situation, has led some of our friends into pregnancy. Some of them they are taken to the street to do petty training.
Most of our friends now have come drop out of school just because of this Ebola. Some of them are walking the street doing nothing, sitting at home idle, watching films. We don't really know what to do.
As students, we decided to abide by the rules and regulations being set by the Ministry of Health and Sanitation because we want to combat this disease.
This Ebola case is very worse in this our country. Some of our colleagues today they are orphan right now. Their parents have died. So they are left alone, nobody to pay their school fees, more especially the girls. Some of them are now pregnant, they are roaming about in the streets.
There was still they stay at home, and it was very difficult for us. Some family, they can only get their food when they work for the day, but due to the still they stay at home, they could not afford food. I have a friend of mine, both the father and the mother, who contracted the disease, and now he's in a very traumatized situation, thinking of what to do, and he has become an orphan. This outbreak of Ebola has just bring everything to stand still.
I'm happy because I'm still alive, that tells me there is still hope. I believe that this is not the end of our future. I believe that we are going to make it.
I am Christian Kagbo, assistant teacher to Moses Bangra from the Moritown Municipal Junior Secondary School.
Okay.
A school partnering with Aranijanos in Hungary. Deadly virus has directly affected me because I've lost my aunt who was a nurse. So like it's really pathetic for me. And of course my students also, because by now they should have been in maybe examination weeks, more especially those that are in Form 3. And I'm very much like pity for them because this deadly disease has like seriously affected their academic work.
What is the process of like quarantine, like how you feed the person, how you like just keep them going basically?
Sure, yeah. I've taken care of one patient who had Ebola and a couple of patients who luckily didn't get Ebola, or one we'll wait and see. One of the reasons that people with Ebola die is that they get profoundly dehydrated and they go into shock because they have a lot of vomiting and diarrhea. And it's almost like cholera. So have you all heard of, you know what cholera is? So cholera is a bacterial infection that is waterborne in developing countries that have poor water sanitation systems. And cholera causes such bad intestinal symptoms that people can dehydrate to the point of shock in the course of a day, a single day or two. And so, I don't want to be really gross, but I guess since you asked, people can have 6 liters of diarrhea a day with Ebola. So you can imagine how easily they get dehydrated. So that's why intravenous fluids is really the mainstay of support for people with Ebola. Now, in most Ebola treatment units, they don't have IV tubing, they don't have the bags of IV saline, they don't have clean needles, so the patients are told to rehydrate themselves orally. And if you're very sick, you really can't take in 6 liters a day. You can't take in enough fluids to prevent yourself from being dehydrated. And in those centers, the mortality rate is 60-70%. In the centers that are in areas where they do have clean needles and intravenous fluids, the mortality rate drops, sometimes as low as 30%, actually. And another reason that they die is that when they have all these intestinal symptoms, they deplete their body's store of potassium to the point that their heart cannot function properly, and they have a cardiac death in that case. So depleting their potassium is another really important intervention. And that can most easily done intravenously. But it's safest to do that when you actually have blood tests to measure potassium. So in the US, very simple. We have these really cool little cubes that are bedside blood testing equipment so that we don't have to send any Ebola and any infectious blood down to our regular lab. We have these little, what they're called point of care testing. So it really is the size of a toaster, and it can give you a potassium level in about 15 seconds with a drop of blood. So we would use that to determine potassium level. But they don't have this equipment in more than about 5% of Ebola treatment units in West Africa. So they can't measure potassium levels. So they either guess and give people a lot of potassium, or they try to put it in the intravenous fluids. But it's very hard to keep up with that potassium loss. So dehydration and potassium are 2 major causes of death that seem so avoidable to us who are used to modern Western hospital care because it's so simple to make those measurements. But the expense and the logistics have made it impossible. For example, they took those cubes, even smaller versions that they're kind of like out of Star Trek or something, little handheld devices that you could put a drop of blood and get a potassium level. They brought those. MSF brought those to West Africa, but the humidity was so high in these equatorial countries that the little slips of paper that you put the drop of blood on would curl up or fold up, wrinkle, and the equipment became unusable. So it wasn't that they didn't have the equipment, it wasn't that they didn't have the strips, it's that the weather conditions didn't allow their use. So it's sort of like everything piles on against these poor people in Sierra Leone, even the weather.
What Ebola has done is to expose the severe governance challenges that exist within all facets of our society. Many of the health systems have crumbled and collapsed in the midst of the epidemic. So Ebola has raised and drawn our attention to the fact that there's a need for us to do a lot more in terms of the health sector. All throughout West Africa, you've seen civil society step up. When government institutions have crumbled or have not been able to address the crisis, civil society groups are now taking the lead to ensure that the message gets to the people. So we've been leading public education efforts in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and recently in Nigeria to educate people as to how to prevent the disease, because it's a disease that could be easily preventable if the right steps are taken. A lot of the challenge is at the local level. If we can address the challenge at the local level and better manage and govern the little resources that we have, that can make a huge difference, which could easily be supplemented by international efforts.
Economically pay for their own treatment centers, or do they need to rely on outside countries such as the U.S. to fund them?
My understanding is that they really can't pay for the treatment centers, that they are relying almost completely on international funding, and not just funding, but also international personnel. They don't have enough surviving physicians and nurses to staff Ebola treatment units. So a lot of the care is being provided by physicians and nurses who volunteer with different non-governmental organizations, the biggest one being MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders. But also other groups have stepped up and are organizing hospitals and providing direct care for patients.
Part of what we've done is to call on our government to take a very serious look at public health service delivery in our respective countries. There's a lot that can be done in terms of rebuilding the public health system, improving the management and the coordination of the systems. It's not always about resources. So it's about better management of the little resources that you have. And if we manage those resources better, we think that we can make a significant difference in some of the negative statistics, and we can prevent Ebola from reoccurring again in the sub-region.
He told us that the cultural burial practices are what propagates the spread. So do you know how people are changing the burial practices and how it's supposed to be properly done?
Yeah,
and spreading the disease.
Changing burial practices is that's something that someone like Hindo could actually be very, very helpful in establishing that cultural change. It's a deep-seated part of the culture that when someone dies, everyone touches their body, washes their body. Of course, this varies from ethnic group to ethnic group within those countries. But there's a lot of touching, there's a lot of exposure. And when someone dies of Ebola, because of all the GI symptoms they've had, because of possible bleeding, their whole body is really covered with virus. So any body part that you touch, you really can get virus on your hands and then spread it. So there's no touching allowed in the safer burial practices that are being taught and encouraged. And that runs afoul of both religious and cultural norms that, again, are deep-seated and historically rooted. So the efforts to change burial practices such that there's no touching of the body. You can look at the body but not touch the body. And then the body gets sealed in a body bag and either cremated or buried. Those practices that education has been more successful in Liberia than it has in Sierra Leone or Guinea. And it may be in part that Liberia has a lot of the outbreak was urban in Liberia, and the urban parts of Liberia are more connected to the United States and to the West than rural parts of any of these countries or any part of Sierra Leone. So it may be that it was easier to change people's mind in Liberia, or that the community educators were more successful for other reasons. But in Liberia, I think more than 70%, close to 80% of burial practices are now so-called safe burial practices, and it's a lot lower in Sierra Leone. I think that has to be one of the most grim jobs in the world right now, is being one of the body handlers for Ebola in one of those three countries.
One of the things that constantly gives me hope is the resilience of the ordinary African man, the ordinary African woman. They are of a very strong character. In Liberia, Sierra Leone, they've overcome conflicts, they've overcome long wars. In Nigeria as well, they've overcome very major conflict situations. So I have no doubts that we're going to overcome it. I think it's just a matter of time, and I think we need to change cultural practices and address some of the governance challenges. But definitely, it may not be in a year, it may not be in 2 years, but these are challenges that will be overcome.
If there are the experimental treatments for Ebola, there are two things. There are vaccines, which would prevent Ebola infection if they work, and then there are antiviral medications, which presumably you would like to be able to use to treat someone in the early stages of Ebola, or even the later stages of Ebola, to actually kill the virus, prevent it from replicating. And those have worked in the animal models in which they've been tried, and we'll just have to see how they work in the human studies. It's very difficult to do clinical research under the conditions that there are in Sierra Leone.
Je m'appelle Sabat Tembesadno, je suis un patient qui a été guéri de la maladie Ebola. J'ai été victime, il faut qu'on voie ma face. La fièvre et Ebola, pour moi, je l'ai mis au même titre que les autres maladies. Rien ne peut m'effrayer sur cette terre, excepté Dieu. Et le secret n'est rien d'autre que pour celui qui atteint de ça, tu viens très tôt. Je suis venu. Ceux ou celles qui sont en train de faire nos traitements, on dirait les hommes qui vont dans la Lune, les cosmonautes. Si eux sont contaminés, qui va venir nous traiter? Si tu vas pour la lutte, tu ne vas pas aller mettre les bras ballants. Ce n'est pas l'habillement qu'il faut voir, mais l'objectif qui n'est rien d'autre que notre soulagement. Ce n'est pas l'humanisme qu'ils sont en train de faire.
No, it's a great question. I think it's one of the reasons that I think many people who have Ebola infection in Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea, have not sought care. So I think it's scary. The treatment units are scary. And, you know, our media sensationalizes things. There are a lot of things out there that are not true. Well, the same is true whether it is, you know, person-to-person communication or media communication in those countries. So there are many people who think that Ebola treatment units will kill their family members, and so they hide family members from the health workers who are trying to collect sick patients and take them to treatment units. So that's one of the reasons people fight isolation, is some of these misconceptions.
Le soutien moral est très très important pour le patient. Quand il y a un patient qui ne va pas bien, qui ne croit pas à la maladie, ou bien il y a un patient qui refuse le traitement, qui refuse de manger. Moi, je m'habille, je rentre aussi. J'arrive à conseiller le patient que quand tu prends bien tes médicaments et puis tu manges bien, tu peux guérir.
Everywhere we work, we've seen fear and conspiracy theories around fatal illnesses. What's the best way to attack fear and conspiracy? When you can link a public information campaign to real action on behalf of the afflicted, then you start to have survivors who can say, you know, I had Ebola and I went to a center and I had to be isolated so that it wouldn't infect the rest of my family, but I survived and I got good care. We need that to happen, and that will be a major way to combat stigma and fear, to improve the quality of care.
So I'm thinking about a personal story about the community in Boompay. And the first thing that comes to me is when I first went to meet my family. So I'm adopted. My father's from Sierra Leone. My birth mother's was a white American who passed away of cancer. So I never got to meet her, but I got to hear stories and see pictures and meet some family members. But then I got to go to Sierra Leone to meet my father for the first time, my birth father. And when I got there, there were hundreds of people to welcome me. And that morning, my father had given me this green African dress to wear into our family's village, and he had a matching green shirt on. And when we got to the village, all the hundreds of people parted, and all the women of the village came forward wearing the same green dress that I'd been given that morning. And they were singing, "We're preparing for Sarah." And I had never met anybody there in my entire life. I'd never seen anyone, and they were singing in Mende, in my family's language. And it was as if they'd always known me. It was beautiful. It was amazing. It was overwhelming. So this community is so beautiful and so welcoming, and they do that for everyone. If you came to visit, they would welcome you and show you love as a guest and show you honor. And that's one of my favorite things about Sierra Leone and the Boompay chiefdom. What had us start the Pessoa Foundation was we realized there was really a need around education. And students really wanted to go to school, and not everyone can afford to go to school because school is not free in Sierra Leone. So you have to be able to buy a uniform, you have to be able to buy your clothes, which is the uniform, shoes, your books, and so on. So we decided to start with education and really help support the community around education. So that's what we've been doing for the last about 8 years. And now there's a bigger issue. The Ebola situation has gotten huge. And my family and everyone on the ground in Sierra Leone has been working very, very hard to keep Ebola from spreading. My family runs a chiefdom of 40,000 people. My brother Hindobe, my father the chief, they're all working hard with the community to make sure Ebola doesn't spread. So one of the issues is people are getting quarantined and they have to stay in their home. And it takes the government a while to get food to them because there are so many cases. And then people leave their place of being quarantined and they can spread it to other people. So one of the things that we've been doing with the Pessoa Foundation is we're looking at helping to provide food for families so they can stay in quarantined areas. We've provided money for a campaign to spread awareness about Ebola so people in rural areas know what's going on. Also, we've sent money for sanitary, different antiseptics and sanitary products so people stay healthy and that it doesn't spread.
Good day. I know you might have heard about the Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone, which has killed more than 1,000 people in the country. And so I'm going to briefly explain what are some of the things I have done in a particular chiefdom Bompegao Chiefdom, we have the country is divided into provinces, and the provinces are divided into districts, and the districts are divided into chiefdom. So Bompe Chiefdom, where I am presently working, has about 257 villages, which I am covering with Ebola education since the outbreak started. I guess you may want to know me and know how I started. My name is Joseph Hindo Wipusoa. Most people call me Hindo at home and even in school. I am a law student at the University of Sierra Leone, and I do a lot of activities for Taking It Global, World Leadership School in Denver, Taking It Global in Canada, and even the Pusoa Foundation, in which I cover most of my work as an organization. And so when the outbreak started in the far east of the country, by then I was in Freetown in May. And so after my second semester law exams, I asked myself, what can I come home to do for my people? Thinking about the high rate of illiteracy, and then the outbreak was mounting as a result of ignorance and then culture. So I said to myself, I think I need to come back home to do something in order to actually help safeguard the lives of my people. So my first step was the distribution of posters, Ebola posters. So with all of our ongoing activities and education, and also the distribution of buckets and chlorine, so far in all of the villages we have went to, they have not experienced any outbreak there. And so the Bauma incident occurred before the first task force group went there to educate people. So at the moment, what we urgently need is resources in order to help contain the outbreak in Bauma village, which has spread to up to 5 villages at the moment. And so all we need is food so that we can quarantine and isolate contacts. We give them food, we can give them medicines, and also multivitamins and food to survivors, and also take on the responsibility to communicate with people in their villages to have no stigma attached to their stay. Let them continue to stay as they used to stay before. And so so far, yes, we have yielded a lot of good fruits. So we also need an increment of the task force, and also more buckets and chlorine for churches and mosques and hospitals in the entire chiefdom. If you can help us in this regard, so that we too can have a peaceful upcoming new year, we can appreciate you so dearly. We will not be celebrating Christmas as it used to be, and there are no schools going on present. All schools are closed. Most students are losing their potentials. Companies are closing. Businesses are not running. People are isolated in places, and some of these people who are isolated are not getting sufficient food.
And how you could actually help is if you donate to the Pessoa Foundation or other organizations that are doing the same thing. People can use all the help they can get. It's going to a very good cause. And it's really important because this impacts all of us. We've seen cases here in the United States and all over the world. Unfortunately, people in other parts of West Africa, specifically Sierra Leone, they don't have the medicines that we have here in the United States and other European countries. And so the need is really great. So anything you can do a YouTube video, spread awareness, have other people donate, you donate. Whatever you can do really does make a difference. So thank you.